Hello everyone, Randy Harrington here. Today's video I'm going to talk to you about something that happened out at the 400 with me and Shane several years ago, but it was right after we did that homemade video for the Amazon Prime called Into the 400. So it was in the height of all the activity out there, and only after the fact, only after that stretch of time and putting everything together do we realize almost all of the activity that we had out there involved two juveniles from this family unit. But tonight's video, I want to talk about a specific incident that happened with me and Shane camping up on a ridge or just below a ridge called Crawler Hill. And the reason we call it Crawler Hill, Shane actually calls it Crawler Hill because of an incident that he captured on one of his cameras. I don't know if it was a GoPro or his phone, but he was filming over his shoulder as he was walking on an old wagon trail. There's a wagon trail. There's actually a homestead downhill from this location that we have the bait station set up. So if you check out any of the videos that involves the bait station, it's downhill from this location quite a ways. So this is way up on the ridge, but there's an old wagon trail. And you can tell because it creates a little shelf on the side of the ridge as it angles around the ridge. Well, anyways, it was on this little shelf that we were camping on. And it took us like 2 hours to cut a trail up there. We had to chainsaws and pruning shears and sawzalls. We spent a long time being able to get that Polaris up there. But once we got up there, we were able to set up a camp. Now, so Shane was previously walking on that wagon trail, filming over his shoulder because he was hearing noises up just up over the crest of that ridge. And then I'm going to show you the video so you can see it, because this is what started this whole process of going to this spot. And so it's important that you understand the history of this spot. But you could see something moving along the top of the ridge and popping its head up as it was following him. Shane would hear a noise, and so he'd look up there and not see anything. And then he would keep walking, and you'd see something just kind of skirting along the crest of that hill, popping its head up and staying with him and popping its head up. So that's interesting. More than likely, it was probably one of the juveniles. So flash forward to the time that he and I set up a camp there. And, we'd also had a time one night where we went up there with a group of people in the making of the video, the documentary, that we saw some activity just up in those trees where we assumed it was the larger one, maybe an adult, maybe the male, I don't know, but it was fleeting. It was on thermal, and saw it doing a motion that I assumed was a rock being thrown, so much so that I thought it was one of the people from our group who was a little bit of an airhead, and he would get further away from us, and it was very loud, a little obnoxious. So I just assumed it was him, and I yelled at him, because I thought he was up there throwing a rock and being silly, and I am not into that kind of stuff at all. You do not throw rocks when we're out bigfooting. If you are caught doing something like that, to me, you're out, because we are not going to be misinterpreting people's goofy behaviors, making noises and throwing rocks and stuff like that. We want to know when something like that is happening, that it's our target species doing that. So when I saw the figure up there with my thermal camera, I just assumed he had moved up the hill above us and was being silly. So I'm hollering at him, and he pipes up in the darkness right next to me. He's like, "I'm right here." And so I'm caught off guard. So that's when I start recording. But the action had already happened, where we saw the arm swing like it was throwing a rock. So man, you talk about being caught off guard for a moment. Anyways, that in itself is a whole long other story, because there were things that happened there while we were watching this figure up the hill above us. But it's that same location. So we're camping there, and we have all this stuff set up, and Shane and I are in the tent. And you know, I mean, you guys have seen all my videos about our log recorders and how we have those set up, but you know, specifically, I have one of these setups where, you know, I've got a long cord that strings from the log. So we had the tent set up on that wagon trail, and the log was uphill some ways, because we just assumed that more than likely they would come in above us. Given the history of what has already happened there, so we set up one of these things up the hill, just pointing uphill. And you guys know, all the recordings that we've ever gotten at the 400 involve these parabolics, which are these units here, and they slide in the log, and so you guys know. But in this particular evening, back at the tent, I had a splitter on the end of the cord and 2 headsets. So when it's time to get in the tent, we can get in the tent, get quiet, lay down, and have the headsets on, and can listen to what's happening around us, or in this case above us on the ridge, live, in the moment, while it's happening. So I'm just going to tell you what I heard from my point of view. We were hearing stuff going on. We were hearing rocks being thrown, rocks landing around the campsite and things like that. And there were specific things that we heard that's going to come out in one of the videos that I show you from Shane's live feeds. I've got a couple of live feeds from those 2 nights that Shane put out that I was able to obtain, and so I'm going to put them on there for you to see. But while we're laying in the floor of the tent and listening, I could hear footfalls and then rocks being thrown, and then footfalls. And I was telling Shane, I said, it almost sounds like they're coming out to the crest of the hill, throwing the rock, and then retreating. I didn't know what it looked like up there, because Shane had been up there, but I hadn't. But I'm just saying that's what it sounded like to me. And then there were a couple of times you could hear a branch break, what sounded like a branch break. So you'd hear footfalls, a branch break, a rock throw, and then a retreat. Sometimes in that pattern, sometimes the rocks would be before or after the... Well, needless to say, in one of these live feeds, Shane is up there talking, and he finds 2 maybe 1-inch diameter saplings at the crest of this hill coming down, looking down towards our tent area, our campsite area, that were broken. So could that be one of the ones that I had heard, or we had heard? You know, within the rocks being thrown, maybe, possibly, or even probably, because they were lone standing tree saplings that were broken off about 10-12 feet apart in the general same location up there on that ridge. So it's interesting. So needless to say, this was the equipment that we were able to use to hear what was going on up there. Very effective. So it worked out well. But here's what happened. The first night was lots of rocks being thrown, and so then Shane gets up, goes up the hill, and starts looking around, and he finds on the back side of this little ridge where a compression trail had come in. And when it came to a point where he actually, I think he found some toe imprints on a couple of them where they hit dirt, and the size would indicate that indeed it was the 2 siblings that we were dealing with at that point. So here's the interesting part. Shane had a conversation with, I believe it was the producer, Alex Merkin, and he's actually the one who did the breakdown of the bear thermal that we recently got, that we were excited about, thinking that it was a Bigfoot, and he's the one who broke it down, and it was a bear. So so this is the kind of producer we're working with. He's not here for fluff. We're not here to fluff you up with things that aren't true, and making drama and dramatics, and we're here for the truth. So he was having a conversation with Shane about all of these rocks that were being tossed down on us, and they were having a conversation about how could we mark some rocks that they were throwing. And so that whole conversation went from, maybe using luminol, spraying rocks with luminol, which I think you could see or smell, and would coat the rocks. So, that may not have been feasible, even though it's a good idea. We came up with a relatively simple one. And I believe this was from Alex Merkin himself, to mark the rocks. And so we took a Sharpie pen and gathered up, I'm saying 30 or 40 rocks. And Shane put marks on the rocks. Went up there where these footprints were found, behind a specific tree area. And I believe he could see where rocks were picked up out of that area. So he placed 2 or 3 piles of rocks with the marks on them, with the mark sides down, so that these juveniles, that if they moved back into this area on a second night, just looking down at the ground, would just see rocks and not rocks that were marked. And indeed, that's the case. What happened? Rocks were thrown again, and we heard one specifically hit the Polaris. So believe me, we scoured that whole ridge side looking for rocks around the campsite. The ground is covered with leaf litter and lots of rocks. So to find specific rocks, very, very difficult. So went in, and the next day heard a rock that hit the Polaris. So we were able to find one of the rocks after the second night, that indeed a rock was by the tire that had a mark on it, and Shane has that rock. So we were excited. We were like, man, this worked. How often can you do something like that and actually have it work? But there's a couple of things that worked in our favor. We had a couple of juveniles that we had been interacting with. We walked out into the field on that little juvenile. So we'd had a lot of interactions with the same juveniles. So that was the lucky part. I don't think you're going to get this same behavior with an adult Bigfoot. I don't think they will put that much time into messing with us as far as the rock throwing incident. I mean, it happened all night long. So, and even laying in the tent while it was happening, Shane and I were whispering to each other, and I was like, man, it's got to be the juveniles. I was like, because who else can invest that much time over such a trivial thing like just tossing rocks, down at us? It's got to be the juveniles, because who can spend that kind of time? So those are the thought processes we had while things were happening. We were enjoying the moments while things were happening, and when we would actually try to determine when we would hear a rock land, we were like, oh, that hit the chair, or ooh, that hit the table over there. I don't think any of the rocks hit the tent, but they did hit the Polaris. You could hear them hit the plastic, on the Polaris and things like that. So it was a very interesting night, and to be able to have that happen a second night in a row with marked rocks that Shane had placed up there was pretty wild. I mean, we haven't had another incident of a night like that with that many rocks being thrown again. But now that we've got the thermal drone, we're praying for another night like that to happen, because that means they're going to be very close and we can send the drone up. I mean, we'll get out of the tent and send the drone up if it happens again like that. but unfortunately we have not had the same type of incident happen, but we're gearing up for it. But this is going to be a video about what happened that night. I want you to listen to Shane's videos. I'm going to let you see the crawler video that started the whole thing, where he was being trailed, and then I'm going to let you hear the videos of him doing some live feeds. The feeds are not high quality, so they may have catches and hitches in them, but I'm still going to play them as they are, and hope that you can enjoy the process of while we were there and the things that happened. But it was a significant behavior thing that we think we validated as being a fact, that rock throwing is a thing. So certainly not everything that lands is going to be a rock, but in this instance it was rocks being thrown, and I think we proved that. Unfortunately, you got a lot of people that will bite on this, and next thing you know, there rocks thrown everywhere, when indeed it's acorns falling or walnuts falling or even pieces of wood and bark falling off trees. The forest floor is covered with 3 foot thick of matter that has fallen from trees. So things fall from trees constantly. We have to be aware of that. So don't just assume because you hear a noise that you think it's a rock being thrown. I mean, you have to be sure if you're gonna pass this off as valid information. So I think we did a great job on this. It was fantastic to be a part of it, but I'm going to lay out these videos for you to listen to, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So we're going to start with the general lay of the land. Anyone who's watched our videos knows where we've got our base camp, and on this map you're going to see that the base camp is circled in red, and that's in that low-lying area. To the west of that is where we find almost all of the mudflat footprints that you've seen videos of. And the blue circle is the old homestead foundation where Shane has set up his baiting station. And then that trail meanders on up the hill, and at the very top where that yellow X is where this incident took place. We call that Crawler Hill. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit closer picture so you can get a closer view of Crawler Hill. So there is the trail coming up, and that's where the tent was located, on an old wagon trail. And the yellow X at the top of at the bottom of the picture with the arrows pointing down is where the creatures, or the Sasquatch came in, the juveniles came in and were tossing rocks down to our tent that was on that wagon trail. So you can see the terrain coming up there, and this is probably one of the highest points on the property. And so it's important that you see why we even chose to be there. So you're going to need to watch the video of Shane. A couple of years prior to this, was walking up there and captured something over his right shoulder, and that's why he calls it Crawler Hill, and that's why we chose this place. Now here is a view of the point of view from up the hill from the camp. The tent is on that wagon trail, and the view is from the juvenile Sasquatch point of view, looking down at the campsite. Now the next picture is going to be downhill looking up. So this is below the tent, further down the hill looking up, and I graciously drew 2 shadowy figures up there at the top. That would be the general location where they would come in above the campsite there, and you can see how it goes uphill, and that's the top of the property. And so we gave them the top of the hill, and that's indeed what they used. So the first video is going to be 2 years prior to this, where Shane viewed something peeking up over the ridge as he was walking down the wagon trail.
dark image is way up there, but that middle one, it's moving.
Right between those trees.
Yep.
Hey Matt, come here.
I will put a link to this video on for Ozark Mountain Sasquatch for you to see this video yourself. It does not do it justice for me trying to transfer it over to here because I could not get the quality from the video that you can see. So I will just put the link in the description of this video.
We are live out in the 400. Behind me is uphill. That's the area of interest. This is where we had the rocks coming from last time. Randy right now is building some camo for the pole that carries the thermal camera, which is going to be up in a tree tonight. Randy, right?
Yep, we're going to have it peeking out around a tree about 20 feet up. It's going to be, let's just say this is the edge of the tree. So it's going to be peeking around the tree like that. And the camera is going to be on this little platform right here. So we'll set it up to watch the target area that we want to watch tonight and hope they don't notice it. So I'm going to put a lot more branches on it. Matter of fact, they probably will notice it because it's going to be more branchy than anything they've ever seen before.
So right up here was what I showed you when I was filming myself in the camera. This is uphill, so this is where the rocks were coming from last time. There's a tree right over here, which you can see right here. So we've actually got a ladder over there, and we're going to go up in that tree, up in this area, and that's going to get the camera up where it can see up there where we can't see right now. So we're also going to be running the parabolic mic, and we're going to time turning them on together so that way our audio and the video from the FLIR is somewhat synced up. And with any luck, we will at least get some, thermal signatures while we have these rocks coming in. It's kind of thick up there, but we're taking baby steps. We don't want to push too hard at this point. If everything works out tonight, then we'll push a little harder next time. So back to the rocks, we are going to be setting up several piles of rocks up there, and each pile is going to have its own distinct marking. That way, we get into those rocks back in camp in the morning that we find, we'll be able to distinguish which pile they came from and exactly where they picked that rock up at, which is going to give us a little information about the strategy that they're using up there to stay concealed and all that good stuff. So yeah, just to know more data mining.
Well, you might mention to them that even where they're throwing the rocks from seems to be at about this 50-yard periphery that they like to keep. When we had our 2 thermals, there was pretty good distance where we caught them. So we started talking about how much of a buffer zone do you think they need. So here it is. We were in the tent, and they still were 50 yards out. So
Yeah, seems like a common number, huh? So that's it. I'll jump on here from time to time throughout the day, maybe this evening if we start getting some good stuff, and we'll keep you guys somewhat filled in. And that's it for now. Me and Randy just sitting here chilling out, enjoying the great weather. Thought I'd jump on here real quick and give you guys a little shot of what we got going on here tonight. So right up here is the thermal camera. Up there in the tree. Let's see if I can zoom into it here. I know it's all fuzzy. I'm on my backup phone, so right there's the thermal camera, all nice and hidden in that tree there. See how high it is, how high up it is. So we have it up there. It's pointing this direction, which is uphill, so we had to get the camera up to a high enough level where it can see all this area up here. And we've already tested the camera itself, and we took turns going way back up in here to see how far we were going to be able to see. And we got a pretty good view of where we think they came in last time and tossed the rocks at us all night long. What's up, Doobie? So yeah, we're going to try to repeat this tonight and see if we can't get those marked rocks thrown back into camp. We've got the thermal set up, watching where it all happened from last time. See, camp is right there. Camera's right there. So this camera is going to stay up here all night long, and we'll be able to sync up the video with the audio of the parabolic mic, which will be sitting right over here next to camp, pointing up this way also. That parabolic mic is so sensitive, like you can hear and pick up footsteps from up here, even though the parabolic is down here. So it's super sensitive. And so we have this covered with the camera. We got the audio set up. We're going to have 4 or 5 piles of rocks that have different marks on them. Each pile will have a different symbol on it. So if those rocks end up back in camp tonight, we'll know exactly which pile it came from, where it was, which is going to give us a little sense of what to do next within our strategy and what next baby step to take. So as you see, this FLIR camera it runs off a 12 volt. Right there you have a screen. We just used the screen to line it up and get it pointing in the direction that we wanted. So this will be closed up and sitting here all night long. It will record all night, so we'll have a lot of footage to go through, of course, but this will close up. Then we're going to cover this with branches and leaves and whatnot, so it's you know, a little more hidden. But you can see right there is the back side of the camera, and we're still gonna add to that a little bit, and so it's not just obvious, you know. But as far as we know, they come in from up there, so this is actually on the back side of the tree from where they should be coming at, which is the only real safe area for them to get in around us. So there you go. Hopefully it's going to be a productive night. If it's anything like it was few weeks ago up here, then we'll be leaving tomorrow very happy people. So there is camp. That's Randy sitting down, and he's going through the audio right now. We have already located, just in the very beginning when we started recording and got into the tent. We got into the tent because we were starting to hear footfalls and whatnot around us, and literally as soon as we got in the tent, within 15 minutes we started getting these rocks, pelting around us. And I hadn't mentioned yet that one of the things that we captured last night that we've already listened to, and it's loud and clear, is what sounds to be a child going, ah! And we just located it, and it's loud and clear. So just another anomaly that is really cool. We haven't gotten too far into it, and we're already getting some of the things that we heard came out really, really well on the audio. So super exciting. I'm up here just above camp, and I'm just going to show you guys a couple of things that are interesting. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, and I'm not saying that this is anything in particular, but just an odd thing. So you see this tree right here. This small tree is broken, and then I'm just going to pan to right here, and you have another tree that's broken off at almost the exact same height. Right there. And then next to that one, we have another tree that has been broken. And if you look here, there are no large limbs on the ground whatsoever. There's another one. There are no large limbs on the ground whatsoever that could have fallen and broken these. And literally, so I'll show you how far away from this that we are. So there's the camp, and here's these broken trees. There.
As I said before, the first night we were laying in the tent, there were times we heard snapping of branches and footfalls that correlated with the rocks being thrown. And I even mentioned to Shane while we were laying in the floor of the tent, it seemed like they were walking out. We would hear a branch break and a rock get thrown, and then we would hear more footsteps, like they were retreating. So it's like they were walking out to the drop off down to our campsite to throw the rock, but maybe nervously breaking a branch as they were standing there, and then retreating back into the wood line. And so I mentioned that to Shane, and so it's kind of interesting that he found these broken off branches, so they could correlate to what we heard.
Right there. And this is all within a little 8-foot area. So I'm moving southeast right now. And I don't know, the sun may be in the way of this, but there is a clear trail that goes right up through there and goes up into this area where we are pretty sure the rocks were coming from last night. We think that this is why we weren't able to get anything on the thermal. We think that they were just up and over, out of sight of the thermal, tossing rocks possibly. So, a lot of odd stuff up here. Sorry it's so shaky. I'll try to fix that by using 2 hands instead of 1. So you see down there, there is a bunch of there's a down tree, and I actually sat on the root of that tree 2 years ago, just after I got the crawler hill video, and I was pointed back up. I'm sorry, it's actually that root ball right there. I came up and sat on that root ball and got a black figure up here while I was doing a little video, not really realizing that I'd caught it, and I caught it while I was moving my camera, so it's just a quick glimpse of it. I can't, at that point in time, looking back at the video, I couldn't say for sure if it was what we think it was. later on that afternoon when we went over all the footage. So this here is actually, let me see if I can get to the point. When the Crawler Hill incident happened, the subject was, you can see camp there. The subject was right up here in this area. And I was coming along a trail down here on this bottom side, and it curves around and comes down across the bottom of this hill. So the subject that I caught on film that day was up in this area. And as you see, camp is right there. This is one of the reasons that we decided to camp up here finally, due to that video. And of course the thermals that we've captured up here with Randy. And so, yeah, this is a very, very beautiful place, man. It's such a nice day. You see the trees up here. Up above us is all these thinner trees, very tall. And down below us is much larger, older trees. So we think we're in a pretty good position to get some good evidence. You know, the thermal footage didn't work out last night. It didn't happen last night. But that's okay. We have another night to do this, and we are going to play it a little different tonight. Tonight we're actually going to stay outside the tent. Last night our goal kind of was to, it was our first night up here, so one of the things that we wanted to focus on and do was come up. Once it got to a certain point in the evening, we decided to hunker down inside the tent, and our hope was that they would take an interest and, you know, come in, maybe throw some rocks purposely, and our not reacting was, you know, with the hopes that they would come in closer due to the fact that we weren't reacting to what they were doing, and we would be able to get some FLIR footage. And it didn't work out that way. So last night throughout the evening, hey, what's up, Randy? Fancy seeing you on here. So the fact that they didn't come in closer last night was kind of a bummer. We didn't get the thermal footage we'd hoped for, but what we did get was throughout the night, these rocks, what we think were rocks hitting around camp. And the cool thing about it is this wasn't something that happened consistently all night long. It happened in patterns. And so it would go on for, you know, 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, and then it would stop for, you know, an hour, and then it would start again, and then it would stop. If this was things falling out of trees, which, you know, I could show you, but there's nothing in the trees above where we're camped as far as acorns or walnuts. There's nothing like that that could have been falling into camp. So whatever it was hitting around camp, you know, had to have been coming from an outside source. And there is lots of rocks laying on the ground around camp. So tonight, one of the things that we're going to do before it gets dark is I'm going to go through and kind of clean out the whole little area of camp, try to get all the rocks off the ground. So tomorrow morning when we wake up, we'll be able to identify the possible rocks if it happens again, and show that, you know, these rocks were not there the previous morning. So yeah, definitely rocks. Get down here to listen. Okay, so Randy's going through the audio right now. So I'm going to get off here and I'm going to go back and keep listening to this audio. And hopefully when it's all said and done, we're going to have some good stuff out of this weekend, and we'll put it all out for you guys to check out.
So indeed, we did have rocks thrown, and couldn't. The only rock that we found was one that we heard hit the Polaris, and found it by the Polaris tire. So you can see in the picture there where the Polaris is. A rock that was marked was found by the Polaris tire after we heard it hit the plastic. So this next and last video I'm going to show is after all this took place. Shane went home and did a video talking about this whole incident, and this is his version of the events.
So what I wanted to talk about was just some of the things that we had going on last weekend. Um, as you guys, I'm sure, saw in the group, the videos that I posted from out on Crawler Hill, that was actually the first time that we had ever stayed on Crawler Hill. And we didn't really know what to expect. Every time that we've been up there, we've captured thermal video. I shouldn't say every time. I shouldn't say every time, but most of the time when we go up there, we capture some kind of evidence. And when we've been up there at night, which has just been a few times, we have captured thermals. I get knocks when I'm up there that will come from the bottom of the hill. It's just it seems to be a place where they hang out. My theory, which is only a theory, and it's due to what I've found up there in the past, is that the big male possibly hangs out up there. And we didn't really necessarily get evidence of the big male being there this weekend. What we did get evidence of was at least one of the juveniles, and I'm stating that because on day 2, I found a trackway that led into the upper part of the hill above us, and that was that led to the area where we left the rocks, and I'll get into all that momentarily. So we went out Friday. We made our way up to Crawler Hill, and it was took us a couple hours to get up there in the side by side. We had to clear out some some small trees and debris and whatnot that was in the pathway that got us up to where we were. And previously I hadn't made it all the way up to where we camped on Crawler Hill in the side by side, but we did make it up there. Just took a little extra work, but we made it. So we got up there, we set up camp, kind of chilled for the day, did a little relaxing. We may have taken a nap, in our hammocks and whatnot, but we set things up, and after kind of scoping things out, me and Randy both decided that the hill, the top of the hill just above us to our backs when I'm doing most of the video from up there, was the best place for them to come in unnoticed. As far as the thermal camera was concerned, anywhere else that they could have came in, we would have seen them, and we would have caught them with the thermal. So it just seemed, it was common sense that that's most likely where they would come in. So basically, Friday night, we turned in, I believe it was 10:30ish, and we got into the tent. And the setup in the tent is set up so that we can be on our phones or be looking at the screen that shows what we're seeing on the thermal, without putting out light outside the tent. So we're up underneath this thing in this table that has a large blanket that drapes over all the way around the table, and we're laying up underneath it. At least our upper bodies are laying underneath it, so we're completely closed in. And within, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes of getting in the tent, we started having what sounded like rocks hitting all around camp. One of the peculiar things throughout the 2 nights that we were there was, from what I can tell, I never heard a rock hit the tent. Rocks were hitting trees, rocks were hitting the Polaris, they were hitting the plastic bed on the Polaris, they were hitting the plexiglass windows on the side of the Polaris, they were hitting the wood railing that was actually off of the Polaris and sitting on the uphill side of the Polaris, leaned up against it. We had rocks hitting everything throughout the night, and this went on and on and on and on. When I got home and started going through the audio, I was amazed at all the sounds and of rocks hitting that we weren't necessarily hitting, or that we weren't necessarily hearing. It went on for hours and hours. It went on through the night, and seemed to all kind of shut down at a certain point the next morning. And literally, we have we have rock clacks, we have breaks, we have footsteps, we have what sounds like a young child yelling 2 or 3 times. We have wood knocks. We have, at one point, we have a break, an immediate wood knock, often that sounds like it's further away, and then a rock clack that sounds like it's very close. We had what people describe as the tongue pops or the mouth pops. Sounds like that. We caught that throughout the evening several times. I haven't even gotten into the second night. So back to the audio. There were some things that I started noticing going through just the first night of the audio, and actually 2 things. There were 2 sounds in particular that I kept hearing over and over and over continuously through the night in the midst of all these other sounds. And one of these sounds, it sounds like fingers snapping. So it literally sounds just like that. And that's another thing that, some people call those the tongue pops or the mouth pops. And it very well could be, but when I hear this sound, it reminds me of snapping fingers. And there's also these click sounds that I can't attribute to anything in particular. And these clicks happen all throughout the night in the midst of all these other sounds that we're getting, which was very peculiar. So I made a phone call to a buddy, and the particular program that I'm using for the audio is new to me, so I had to make some calls, or I had to make a call and figure out how to look at the frequencies of all these sounds that I was hearing. And once I did, I started seeing. I just went through 3 or 4 of them actually, and they register within the same frequency range, and they have the same basic frequency pattern when these particular sounds hit. So what that tells us is that there is this sound that these things are making, and they're making it continuously throughout the night, that happens over and over and over. And I can't necessarily attribute what these sounds are, or how these sounds are being made, or what they are exactly, but they definitely are the same sounds happening over and over and over. They're definitely not rocks. Different rocks aren't going to hit the ground on different rocks and make the same sound with the same frequency pattern over and over and over throughout the night. And this is what was happening. So just a peculiar thing that we're going to start keeping an ear out for when we're running these audios, when we're running these parabolic mics and whatnot. And I'll go into our setup a little bit real quick before I go any further, so I'll get back to that. We were in the tent. We had a parabolic mic without the dish on it. It's a setup that Randy has. It's encased within a box, hooked up to the digital recorder. A cord runs into the tent, and we have into a splitter, and we have headphones on. So we're listening to all this coming through the mic in real time all night long. And one of the other things that we got that I haven't really mentioned is voices. I had told Randy previously that just one hill over, we have caught voices. I have a video on my YouTube channel called Voices in 300 or Voices in the 400, and I'm going to go back and process that audio through this new program that I have at some point. But we did hear these voices. Randy did get to hear these voices. The first time it happened, he popped his head up and looked at me all wide-eyed, like, what is that we're hearing? That's kind of crazy. But this is kind of a consistent thing that's happened out there. So, yeah, just tons and tons and tons of audio. And we had the thermal camera sticking out the top of the tent. And pretty quick into this, we realized that getting any FLIR footage was probably not going to happen because of the way things were happening. We pretty well knew immediately that all these rocks that were hitting within camp were coming from the upper part of the hill. It's the only place they could have been coming from. So day 2, I started really thinking about the situation, and So I took a stroll around the top of the hill, and I actually got onto a compression trackway, and I followed it up in the top area of this hill above us, and it went parallel with our camp, and then made a U-turn and came into this real thick area with the largest tree that's on that hill is in this spot. And I followed this compression trail in behind this tree, and there was a couple tracks that had an actual toe prints in them, and it looked to be the 10-inch tracks that we find pretty consistently out there. Put some rocks up there, and I immediately thought I have a Sharpie marker, so I gathered up 23 rocks. I put a mark on every single one of the rocks. I split them up into 3 piles and set them in 3 different areas or 3 different spots along that compression trail, including one that is where the compression trail ended. So oddly enough, that pile was the pile that did not get touched. So for Saturday night, basically the same thing happened. We didn't have as much activity Saturday night. It slowed down a little bit. Maybe they were getting bored with us because we weren't coming out of the tent. We actually stayed up later, and our plan Saturday night was to stay up as late as possible with the hopes that we would start getting rocks thrown into camp while we were outside the tent. And 11:30, 11:45, it just wasn't happening. So we decided to go back to plan B, which was plan A for Friday night, and we climbed back in the tent, and within 15 or 20 minutes the rocks started coming in again, and we started getting these sounds, all these strange sounds and whatnot again. So we woke up Saturday morning. We actually fell asleep within a few hours. Friday night we were up really, really late. We were up for, I don't know, till at least 3:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, listening to all this stuff happen around us. So Saturday night was pretty much the same, but there was less of it. And so Sunday morning we got up. I took the camera and I went up the hill, and I went to where I'd put these 3 piles of rocks, and 2 of the piles were completely gone. I mean, completely gone. So after realizing that, I yelled down at Randy and let him know that the rocks were gone, and he immediately started looking around camp for, looking at all the rocks on the ground, hoping to find one of these rocks that were marked. So going back to Saturday night, one of the first really loud sounds that we had heard was a rock hitting the plastic bed on the side-by-side. And it's clearly, when you hear these audio clips that I'm going to eventually put out, it's obvious what these rocks were hitting. So we knew that one had hit the side-by-side. So after I came down, we started looking around a little more, being more detailed and looking at every rock. And sure enough, there was a rock sitting next to the tire of the back left tire of the side-by-side. And I picked the rock up, and it was one of the rocks that we had marked. Doesn't seem like a big deal, but for us it is a very big deal, because not only did we prove that they are throwing rocks, because you hear the skeptics, well, how do you know that wasn't acorns, or how do you know that wasn't walnuts falling out of trees, or small limbs and whatnot? That's, without any evidence, it's hard to argue against that point. Well, now we have evidence that they absolutely are throwing rocks, because that rock could not have walked back down the hill, and rocks absolutely do not fly without being thrown. So there's no doubt in my mind now, absolutely, even though we've witnessed this and seen this before, we needed to come up with a way to prove what was happening, and that was it. I don't know that anybody has ever done something like that and been able to pull off something like that in a situation like this. So it told us a lot. It told us that, one, my tracking abilities are.
One point I'd like to bring up, this also seems to validate that they follow patterns that you can count on to be repeated. It used the same trail remember, Shane placed those rocks on the compression trail in different locations, and those were the two piles that got thrown. So if you go back to my video about rock throwing and communication patterns, uh, that is based on a 20-year stretch where they were using the same approach to the campsite over and over and over again. So I think that is also key to making something like this work. First, you need to know where they're coming in and keep that hidden, and then use it to your advantage. But it certainly bears fruit.
They work, and of course, I've known that for a long time, but it's nice to have other people be able to see that, and it's not so much about that, but it's just confirmation that when I'm tracking compression trails, which are much harder to track, um, much harder to track. Most people can't even see these compression trails, let alone follow them, and with the hopes that it takes them to the right area, the right spot. And that's what happened. We just got kind of lucky. So we proved that something came up to the top of that hill and threw some of the rocks back down into camp that we had positioned up there, and that was our hope. Um, it also told us for sure where these guys came in, and they had to go to these other two particular spots to use those rocks. So I didn't even look for compression trails that go into the area. That wasn't even on my mind at the time. After we found that the rocks were gone, that two of the piles were gone, so we had 15 rocks that disappeared up there. Um, we only found one, but at a certain point we got tired of looking at every single rock that was in camp because there was tons of them. So I brought that rock home with me. I do have that rock, and I did get all this on video to show what we were doing and how we did it. And more than anything, here's the deal: is it's not so much that we had this crazy stupid idea to put marks on a bunch of rocks and put them up there with the hopes they would throw them. The cool thing is that to be able to replicate that in other places seems unlikely, because in other places we're not going to have that situation that we have in the 400. So what the 400 is to us is a location where we can start to kind of hone in our tactics. And what's up, Randy? There you are. So we're going to be able to kind of hone in our tactics out there because of the situation. And eventually, if we can build a situation like this in other places, we'll be able to use those tactics, and hopefully make them repeatable. Our next step is to go get back out there. Me and Randy are going to get back out there pretty quick within the next couple of weeks, and we're going to go up there and camp again, and we're going to see if we can repeat that whole process.
And we have actually not done that since then. We have not camped back up there again. I do have a tree tent that I would like to use up there, but we have not camped up there.
So it's a pretty big deal when you think about the overall situation and the opportunity that we may have. But we didn't get anything aggressive going on, which was good. We thought that may be a possibility just because we hadn't camped up there before. We hadn't spent the night and stayed there all night long. We've been up there several times at night, but not all night long. So that was a good thing. We didn't get any aggressive behavior or anything. It seemed like they were more trying to get a reaction out of us, if that makes sense. Maybe they were trying to get us back out of the tents because they wanted to watch us. Who knows? We can what if all day long, but we don't really know. So more than anything, the great thing about it was that we got these rocks thrown back into camp. And so we were able to actually show through audio and video proof that these things are throwing rocks. Now, we didn't prove that Bigfoot is throwing these rocks, but we proved that something is absolutely throwing rocks into our camp. And that's a first step, I guess. So
if anybody knows of any other situations like that, that you know, or heard of situations like that, where people have done something like this, let me know, because I'm always looking for, you know, new ideas and better ways to do things, of course. But that's kind of what that's the kind of the good thing about the guys I'm working with. They pretty well know once when we're coming down into the property, just because they're going to hear our vehicles. You know, when we get down to a certain point, a lot of times we'll stop and hike in, but they're still going to hear that. Um, Everything kind of the sound goes through those hollers out there, and you know, goes quite a ways typically. So it's not unheard of to hear something that could be, you know, a half a mile away out there. We actually, one issue we did have was there is actually a highway that runs about, you know, 2.5, 3 miles away, parallel with this hill that's on this to the south. And Randy's mic was so hot that it was actually at times picking up the sound of vehicles. So that was one of the things that we were contending with. It's not bad, and it doesn't wash out, you know, the other sounds that were happening, but just another thing that we have to deal with, you know, all these sounds that we're getting. I mean, I'm not kidding. The reason it's taken so long for me to go through this audio is because there is so much. Literally, any sound you can think of that is attributed to these creatures, we got, except for whoops and yells. Uh, Other than that, we got the sound on audio, and it happens over and over and over throughout the Friday night. I know we got stuff on Saturday night too, but it wasn't as extensive. And I could be shocked. We could be surprised once we start going through that audio. I don't know. We'll see.